Scott, everybody wants to just kind of pack it in eventually at one point, right? Well, Neil Druckmann isn't any different. Doesn't know if he has many games left in him, in fact. Grant Taylor-Hill, over at Insider Gaming. In a recent interview, Neil Druckmann dropped some intimate revelations about his occupational fatigue, stressing how tough it is, how it has been managing to do multiple studios around the world during the development of some of the biggest and most ambitious games ever made, such as The Last of Us and Part 2. He talked about desiring to spend more time with his family and how he doesn't see himself doing this forever at this scale. We'll get back to that part in a second. Ultimately, the Naughty Dog co-president suggested he might not have many more games left in him. In 2023, The Last of Us was released to critical acclaim and became the most highly awarded game in history. In 2020, The Last of Us Part 2 launched under similar circumstances, and while some controversial issues split the community, sure did.
Yeah.
I think it was warranted, though. I get it. Many gamers class Part 2 as a masterpiece and a memorable marvel that'll go down in history. That's Neil Druckmann's legacy. That, and the creation of one of the best game to television live action adaptations ever made. In a recent interview with a Logical Speaking podcast, Druckmann took a deep dive into his longevity as a developer, comparing himself to Quentin Tarantino at one point, referencing the legendary film director's goal of making 10 major movies and then hanging up his clapper. Quote, I'm very curious. I get where it was going.
Interesting terms.
It's the cut, right? Yeah. Quote, I'm very curious whether he sticks to that. I think he will just because he's been saying this for so long. So I could see myself transitioning into something that's more low-key that still allows me to have a creative outlet. But I've started thinking about how many more of these games I have in me, and it's not that many, end quote. Presently, Naughty Dog is believed to be working on The Last of Us Part 3. Of course they are, in at least some way. But there's nothing concrete there. In what was recently said by a Part 2 actor, that he's unaware of so much as a script existing for the project, but it has been said more or less that Neil Druckmann's got something cooking in the back of his head. And he's got a concept and so forth. Dude, I want to back up real quick where did I see that? How many games he has left in him, right? I think this is the biggest takeaway from this. So, if you haven't watched the Grounded, that's what it was. It was Grounded, which is this documentary of them making Part 2. Dude, everybody looks exhausted. Like, Neil looks just spent.
Yeah.
Right? He gets to this point and he's like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And some of the people on the staff that are interviewed going, I don't have it in me physically and mentally to be here till 2 a.m. Right? Like those are it's crunch time, right? Remember it's crunch. Nobody wants to do that.
That was back in the worst season of crunching. Yeah, we kind of got over that as an industry a little bit, but this was definitely back in those days. I haven't seen Grounded myself.
Oh man, it is incredible. Obviously, right, being a big fan of The Last of Us, playing the games, finishing the games, going back for the remake, going into No Return, watching the show, like I'm hooked, right? I'm all in. The fact that I don't have a statue behind me is actually a bit of a heartbreaker, but that's another thing. Either way, to watch Neil Druckmann discuss how the game is produced, how it was made, how exhausting it was. You take a look going, do we really need a Last of Us Part 3 to be 30 hours long? Do we wrap it up?
Yeah.
Like, when you go all the way back to his games of, like, Uncharted, dude, they're like 8 hours, 10 hours long. I miss those games. Dude, I miss where I can sit down, a couple nights in, I'm done the game, and moved on. When's the last game, Scott, you beat in 8 hours? Right? That's a triple A. Considered to be triple A that you finished in 8 hours. I don't think that's actually possible right now, because everything we currently play is like 50 to 60 hours long, if not longer.
Yeah, that's part of the industry issue as a whole and being unsustainable. We're seeing Neil Druckmann kind of, in his own way, explain a bit of that. It gets exhausting to work out. Nobody wants to see these creatives put under that kind of crunch again. But surely, if we're allowing them to have the time to have the ability to create a Last of Us Part 3, I think that needs to happen, because that series needs to have a respectful bookend to it. But
yes, it does.
You can't just do that at the expense of the people involved. I like what Neil Druckmann says about Quentin Tarantino, because that's an interesting idea of having an established end goal. And that's where the finish line is, and after that, you're done. I think that's quite respectable. But he's quite the opposite of Hideo Kojima, where Hideo Kojima is just an open faucet. You cannot turn it off.
He's like, I will never retire. Oh, man, really? All right, that's cool. Now I'll play your games constantly, and especially with this new stealth game, whatever that turns out to be. But either way, he's one of those.
Yeah, I would appreciate an explanation from him about what it's supposed to mean. But
yeah, tell us more. Tell us more. But it is obviously, telling of the industry right now, where people are just burnt out. They are exhausted because these games have gone from a 10-hour, 8-hour experience to now 30, 40, 50 hours, sometimes even longer. Dude, you get into Assassin's Creed Valhalla. Granted, Ubisoft has multiple studios versus where Naughty Dog is just one studio, right? But they do have PlayStation and Sony's help to kind of, carry that further. They have other studios there that come in to help clean up things and do other stuff and this, that, and the other. Where Ubisoft will put on like 10 studios onto one game. So when they get into Assassin's Creed Valhalla, I'm 150 hours, 160 hours in, and still a ton more to do. Like, I don't know if that's necessary. That's why I think I fell in love with Mirage so much, right? Because it was such a much more smaller, compact game. Still 30 hours.
I think that one was that handed across to a couple different Ubisoft studios?
Oh,
I believe that was more than one anyways.
Yeah, sure was.
Thinking of Neil and the issue there being these games are so important. They're such big sellers that it feels like, and I imagine he feels this too, is just he has to do that. And if they don't do that, that could be it for the whole studio. That's really the atmosphere we're in right now. If you spend all this money and you don't create something that sells gangbusters, that's it. You could almost close the door.
Yeah, it has to come out and it has to sell millions, right? You need to be the staple at the moment, right? You have to be the chart topper to make sure that you keep your studio lights on. And that's where you're starting to see all these cuts come in, right? PlayStation just laid off a ton of people, closing studios, laying others off. Insomniac, Guerrilla, London Studios closed, Firesprite getting laid off, Naughty Dog hit with layoffs, right? Like, everybody is getting hit in the industry. Nobody is safe right now. It is such a scary time for a game developer. And it's unfortunate because you think of how well games themselves are actually doing. Dude, we're one of the biggest industries around. But then why can't we keep the employees going? Right? Like, what is the issue there? So, time will tell how much Neil has left in him. I would love to hear that he's like Kojima and never wants to leave, but I also understand that, dude, spending time with family is important. It is very, very important. It keeps you who you are. So it's something that he should be definitely taking care of and making sure that, if you have kids, dude, they're only young for so long, and then they grow up and then they're gone, right? They just move out, they get their own lives, and that's understandable. I'm talking from experience, right?
Yeah.
So it is definitely one of those things. Take it while you can, because your family might not necessarily always be there either. So I don't know. We'll see. But at the end of the day, dude, it's Neil Druckmann. Dude's a legend. If he wants to retire tomorrow, hats off to him. But at the end of the day, man, can't you just be like Kojima? Stick around, man. Don't leave us.
Maybe go work with Kojima. That could produce some very interesting ideas.
That'd be nuts.